Ladies and gentlemen, I have noticed that there are some things happening that are causing a bit of confusion, and that is recent archaeological discoveries that seem out of place. Now, there is nothing unusual about many of these discoveries until they come back with the dates. You see, many of these discoveries are being found to be much, much older than anyone would expect. And I suspect this is due to a growing issue, a problem you cannot see, but it is there, and it is causing people to question our human origins. But I can tell you, they are questioning the wrong thing. Actually, much of our history is becoming more and more tainted and skewed as time goes on. And time, my friends, is one of the major variables in this equation that has yet to be considered in all of this. So now the question is this a bunch of fakery being done deliberately to screw with our heads? Or has the time come where people will look at these strange things and finally realize the truth? And as these professionals turn their heads away from the mysteries of these discoveries, they leave the truth open for interpretation, only to be revealed by those who embrace what is to them something forbidden. So based on our Georgian calendar, recorded human history began between 5,000 and 6,000 years ago. Within that recorded history, with the guide of other surrounding artifacts and ruins, as well as written documents left behind, scientists can date things with pretty good accuracy, using simple carbon-14 dating techniques. Let me explain this. Carbon-14 is a radioactive isotope that is in every living thing. It is spread evenly throughout the planet as cosmic rays hit the atmosphere, correct? When something no longer lives, it is no longer replenished with carbon-14, and the carbon-14 already in it is left only to decay. Now, it has been determined that it takes approximately 5,730 years for half of that carbon-14 to break down and turn into nitrogen-14. And another 5,730 years for half of what's left to break down, and so on. With the instruments we use today, this dating method is only good for about 50,000 years, but it is only really accurate under 5,000 years. You go back in time any further than that, without the confines of a civilization, without the guide of anything written down, and look, these scientists go out of control. I mean, they're going back 40,000, 200,000, 2.3 million, 50 million years, 500 million years, only to conclude that at one time this was the planet of the apes, which was once the planet of the reptiles, and before that it was probably the planet of the aliens. Now folks, in order for today's dating methods to be anywhere near accurate, two things have to remain constant forever. One, the frequency and the movement of celestial bodies. In other words, the pace of time. I do not think that we can assume that time has not expanded and contracted over the years. That would be to assume that every celestial body has always been moving at the same speed and distance always. And two, levels of radiation. Understand that radiation will increase the rate of decay in everything, living or not. That is what radiation does. It pokes holes in the atomic structure. It makes things old very fast. Radiocarbon dating, uranium series dating, this would all be good, but because of radiation, it is all garbage. Everything, it's contaminated. And you have to factor in the effects of electromagnetic radiation on the rate of decay. Look, they find these dinosaur bones, and they're highly irradiated. Now, they're so old that they use relative dating to determine their age. This is based on the age of the rock layer in which it was found, of course. Oh, but wait. When you do use carbon dating on these bones, guess what? You get a date. Oh, but mainstream archaeologists, the majority of them, they don't care. They need the support of their peers in order to get their work published. There are authorities that these scientists have to answer to. And when you start spitting out science that supports the existence of aliens or God that is not within their guidelines of how to do that, what to present to the public and what not to present, then good luck. If you want your findings published, the only thing you can do now is write a book, which is not really a bad thing for the author, because more people read those books than they do scientific journals. And this is really what forbidden archaeology is. It is about going outside the standard methods of study and practice. They don't want an Indiana Jones. They don't want to have to keep rewriting things, and they know the type of controversy it causes. And most scientists within their own careers do not want to go down that road and deal with that. At the end of the day, they are just people with jobs and families who would have to put those things on the line. Now lately, they have been discovering things, and on this highly irradiated planet, they can't figure out why these things are being determined to be very old. I mean millions of years old. Come on, you've got radiation from the sun, magnetars, neutron stars, volcanism, machines like the ones you find at CERN and HAARP put out radiation, all these leaky nuclear power plants, radiation here, radiation there, and you expect to come up with an accurate date for a fossil? And you know, this is one of the reasons why many scientists prefer to go with relative dating, because they already have a written geological record of how old the rock is that they're digging in. So they would rather date an artifact according to the age of the rock layer it was found in. But then you have to account for intrusive burial. In other words, you have to determine if the artifact was buried there intentionally and when. So the point of this, folks, is when they give you a number that has a row of zeros behind it, it is an indicator to you that they are not 100% sure. And at the end of the day, they are not afraid to individually admit that they don't really know. I will give them that. But it is up to you to keep this in mind whenever they find something interesting. So what kinds of things have they found that would raise an eyebrow? Well, let's see. How about the 100-million-year-old hammer, found in London, Texas in 1936? Today, some say it is 400 million years old. Some say 500 million years old. I mean, that is so inconceivably long ago that it might as well have been from another dimension. Let me put this into perspective for you. Let's say man hasn't been around for some 200,000 years. Everything that has happened starting from 200,000 years ago up till today would have to have happened 5 times to equate to just 1 million years. And they're talking about a 500 million year old hammer? Now, many of us have already heard of the 300 million year old screw, right? Anything found in a rock that is naturally formed is automatically going to be considered older than the rock. Which reminds me, how about all the artifacts that are found in lumps of coal? Now, coal is the product of decayed vegetation that has been buried over time under sediment. And after about 400 million years, you have the formation of coal. I'm sorry, folks, but that is a freaking long time. So anything found inside the coal must be older than the coal. Listen, there is a story of a young boy living in the 40s who dropped a lump of coal in his basement. The lump broke in half, and inside was a metal alloy handbell, brass, determined to be 300 million years old because it was found inside the coal. But they find all types of everyday objects in coal. Necklaces, thimbles, nails, pots and pans. Well, maybe not pans. I just threw that one in there. But this shouldn't make any sense to you. It doesn't make any sense to the scientist. But rather than saying, well, maybe it doesn't take millions of years for coal to form, they would rather just say that humans were around millions of years ago. But most scientists won't even go there. They won't even bother to study such an artifact. They may test it on behalf of the researcher. Other than that, they leave it alone. And then the object assumingly either ends up in some back storage area of a museum or someone's private collection. And I'm sure many of these artifacts have also been destroyed. Now, every once in a while, they will find artifacts that we don't see every day. Sometimes they are a hoax. Sometimes the photograph that you see of the artifact is not the true photo of the artifact. Folks, when someone claims to have discovered the remains of something like a giant, how are you supposed to discern the reality of the thing with a single photo? Now, are they really finding giant skeletons? Are they digging up Nephilim bones? Well, if they are, I would hope they would destroy them. Because if they are what some believe they are, then that's some fallen angel's kid they're digging up. They're better off just covering that grave back up and walking away. You know, it's funny. You ever walk into a museum where they house things like this, and you can feel the haunt in the air? And maybe they should do the same when they find a dinosaur. You know what's interesting? Sometimes when they find these dinosaurs, they're in pieces, almost as if they were chopped up. Now, they attribute this to a fight or an attack from a predator. But those of you familiar with ancient Egyptian folklore may know of stories of monsters such as Apep that had to be chopped up to keep it from coming back. But the monster always came back. You know, maybe Osiris was the son of one of these fallen angels. They say he was pretty tall. Maybe they felt the only way to get rid of him was to chop him up into pieces. Think about it. A similar story is also told about Nimrod. But maybe that just means his kingdom was chopped up after his death. Depends on who's telling the story. I don't know. You know, there are discoveries that rewrite history in a different way, and that they seem to confirm some of the ancient writings that exist, such as a series of stones found in Ecuador, the US, France, Colombia, Australia, Turkmenistan, Malta, and southern Calabria, all with the same ancient writing, identified as pre-Sanskrit, making it the oldest written language known to man, also suggesting that it was the global language at that time. But whose language was this? Notice that I didn't name any place in Africa. These stones with the same writing have been found in places surrounding Africa, but not in Africa. Maybe that's just because they haven't found any yet. But understand, they have found a representation of that language in Africa. Do you know where? On the Great Pyramid. Symbols meaning workings of the highest. You know something else? If you were to look closer at this rock structure, inside the little triangular niche is an inscription. An inscription that reads, "From masculine, thundering, granting feminine." And this inscription just happens to be the same type of inscription that was presented to be engraved in pieces of the wreckage from the Roswell UFO crash. You know, since I'm on the subject of the pyramids, and since discussing discoveries that rewrite history, you don't hear many people talking about the seashells. You know, the seashells that are jam-packed into the stones of the pyramid. Isn't that significant? Doesn't that mean something? Perhaps not. Perhaps none of these things from the past mean anything when it truly comes back down to what you believe. Many people don't believe what's written in these ancient texts, and I don't blame them when there's so many conflicting stories. Folks, you are going to be exposed to things that will change some of the things that you thought were supposed to be true. And they are going to keep finding things that turn out to be very old. And I can bet that it won't be because it is very old, but because something is making it appear that way under examination. And if that is the case, if an increase in planetary radiation is causing that to happen, then what is it doing to us?